13 Arizona, 14 UC Santa Barbara, 15 Oregon State, 16 East Carolina. So take it away.
Kind of surprised how high Georgia was. I mean, I know their RPI is really, really good, but they were the sixth. You're giving me they're the sixth place team in the SEC, but they're the seventh best team in the country. That seems weird, especially when the fifth place team in the SEC didn't get a host. We'll move on from that though. East Carolina, I was surprised. I thought when they got eliminated from the AAC tournament on Saturday that would be the end of their hosting chances. And obviously, everybody's surprised by Arizona. At the end of the day, I mean, I know their RPI is not good, but they did win their conference, where another team from their conference got in, and they won their conference tournament. I can make it's not a strong case, but I understand why they're there. I think Arizona definitely deserves to host more than East Carolina does, who didn't win their conference tournament and basically built a resume that is not great. There's no getting around that. So with State, obviously that's what we're going to talk about here. I said it for the last couple of weeks, right? If we got to this point and you're wondering why State didn't get to host, I can just point to that one number, that 5 with the quad 4 losses, and that was going to be the answer. State scheduled soft and then didn't win those games. If they were 14-2 instead of 11-5 in those games, they would be hosting today. I've seen a lot of people talking about, well, State needs to stop scheduling those quad 4 games. Tennessee played 19 quad 4 games, 3 more than Mississippi State. But they were 19-0. And if State had gone undefeated, Arkansas was undefeated. They played 16 quad 4 games, 16-0. Tennessee played 17 quad 4 games. They played 18. They were 17-1. If you have records like that, you can play quad 4 games because your SEC stuff will bring your schedule will bring you up. But when you drop 5 games like that, and look, Missouri is what Missouri is, right? You can't get around them. They're an SEC team that was a quad 4 game. The Ghost doesn't take days off either.
Apparently not.
You had to play them, and that's just he's very busy today. So that just is what it is. But losing games to Central Arkansas, to Austin Peay, to Air Force, and even though it's not a quad 4 game, you were up 5-0 on South Alabama and blew that one. That's why you're not hosting today. That is it. End of discussion. Should they have hosted? Yes. Can I make a much stronger case for State than I can for East Carolina or for Arizona? Yes. But do I understand why they aren't hosting? Yes.
So let's start with a couple of things. Mississippi State had 16 quad 1 wins.
Mm-hmm.
That is better than all but 3 hosts. Arizona has 3. Mississippi State has 16. That's quad 1 beating the best teams that you play. UC Santa Barbara has 3. Oregon State 4. East Carolina 5. Virginia, where Mississippi State is playing, 8. Florida State 8. UNC 9. On and on. Of course, the top is dominated by the SEC. Kentucky has 22 quad 1 wins. That's incredible. Tennessee 21. A&M 17. Georgia 13. Arkansas 13 as well. So the top end of Mississippi State's resume, most certainly deserving of a host, without a doubt. The RPI, though, this is what makes this process so crazy, is when does RPI matter?
Mm-hmm.
When does it matter?
There's no rhyme or reason to this entire process. It's not outlined clearly. It's not, we understand. There's a lot of politicking involved, obviously. East Carolina having their athletic director, people were saying, well, he has to leave the room when they discuss East Carolina. Okay. But he has to come back in the room, too. And if Borky and I and Richard are discussing something, and they're like, all right, now, Richard, we're going to talk about you. Do you think when Richard leaves the room, we'll just be like, he sucks? We're going to sit there and just trash him and tell him he's out? No, he has to come back in the room, and then are we going to tell him, hey, we decided you're out? He's not going to stand for that. That's how this stuff works. So obviously having the right people in the right places is very helpful to East Carolina. But this, here's the thing with East Carolina is that right up until they lost that game on Saturday, nobody was really going to say anything when they won their conference tournament and hosted. But then they lost it, and I like I said, I would not have had them hosting over Mississippi State. But I feel like people sometimes, they go too far sometimes. I think it's like, They think that East Carolina was Mount St. Mary's, sitting there with like an RPI of 297. Or who was it? Eastern Maryland or whoever it was that went 0-48 this year?
Maryland Eastern Shore.
Yeah. Like, that's not who's hosting here. East Carolina's a good program. They've been a good program for the last decade. Cliff Godwin, we all know that name here in the state of Mississippi. They're a good program. They got a really tough regional. Wake Forest going there is a very, very difficult matchup. I won't be surprised to see Wake Forest. Wake Forest is a team that was going to host, and then they got swept their last weekend against North Carolina State, and basically they flip-flopped.
Yeah.
So that's a tough regional for them.
Mark Etheridge pointed this out, and this is anecdotal, but the point's a good one. There were 6 opportunities for teams on the quote-unquote cut line, either hosting national seed or getting in the tournament. All 6 of those on the committee, their teams got the favorable result.
Mm-hmm.
So East Carolina got the final host spot.
Yeah.
Florida, Kansas State, Coastal Carolina, and Indiana were all among the final 6 teams in the field.
Right.
And Florida State got the final national seed.
Yeah.
All of those athletic directors were on the committee.
Yeah. And let's go back a year. John Cohen, USM fans will certainly remember, John Cohen was the chair of the committee. And who got one of the last host spots was Auburn. And everybody was like, why is Auburn hosting? It doesn't make any sense. Well, John Cohen was there. Go back 2 years ago, and there's been a lot of talk that John Cohen pushed to get Ole Miss in to the tournament, even as the athletic director at Mississippi State, because it helped the SEC.
Yeah.
And, there was a lot of talk about that because these guys, they have these positions. You want your athletic director on these committees because they have those positions. They have that influence there. So, when people are talking about the athletic director at East Carolina push for his team, that's his job.
Yeah.
It's his job to support his team. So I don't understand all the uproar about it.
It just the process is flawed, and we're kind of up against a break, so we'll get to that when we come back. But I saw a lot of obviously there was a lot of outrage last night, understandably so, because I think the resumes are there's a clear delineation between Mississippi State's resume and East Carolina and Arizona. I mean, Mississippi State's resume is just significantly better. The only line item where they come up short is the quad 4 losses, but everything else favors Mississippi State in this. Basically, everything else favors Mississippi State in this. I did see, though, some of their stadiums are small. And I understand that's like an emotional reaction where, if you're going to be somebody that's going to cry about stadium size with this, number one, this is supposed to be merit awarded. Now, the bid process makes you wonder, okay, is that actually true? But still, East Carolina has an incredible baseball environment. It is awesome. The stadium is nice. The fans are rabid. Just because they don't have the stadium size that Mississippi State does doesn't mean they are. That should be the factor in whether or not they host. And here's a perfect example for why you don't want that to be precedent. 2 years from now, Jeff Levy's got Mississippi State football rolling. And they go 10-2. And it is down to the final playoff spot between Mississippi State and Penn State. Teams basically equal. Resumes about the same. Do you want the committee saying, well, you know what? Penn State seats 40,000 more people in their stadium. They're going to host the playoff game, not Mississippi State.
Yeah.
You don't want that. So talking about stadium size in this, it's illogical. Because if that is unless that's what you want, unless you want Texas A&M getting opportunities ahead of you in the future in football, if you want Penn State and Wisconsin and Southern Cal to get Florida State, Clemson in the college football playoff era, if you want them to jump you, then okay, so be it. You win on the merit. Only argue the merit and the resumes. You don't have to get into the emotional, the stadium's smaller thing, especially when you're talking about East Carolina, who does a really good job with baseball. It's just not to your scale, but it doesn't mean that theirs is high school or whatever. We'll get to more. This was earlier today. This is the committee chair explaining or trying to explain the conflict of interest in the room with athletic directors whose teams are either on the bubble or on the hosting bubble and how they went about that. Tell me what you think about this.
Challenges of having a committee with so many people that have a vested interest in the outcome?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, Matt. We have a very strict safety net procedure within the NCAA's protocols and rules. If any schools are discussed that have committee members representing them, they have to leave the room. They can't be a part of the discussion. They also cannot be a part of the voting procedure. So there are recusal protocols in place and other protocols to keep that fair and balanced.
You buy it?
No. No.
So here's the thing. Here's what gets me about all this is what's the criteria? What's the process? How do you do it? How do you do it?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about, and I forget what the documentary was called. Long story short, it was a true crime documentary that had real behind-the-scenes footage of a man that was on trial for the murder of his wife. And the details were very sketchy, and it was a long, drawn-out trial. He ended up being found guilty, and then later that conviction was reversed. But during the trial, they had an expert give an opinion about the blood spatter that they found and how it couldn't possibly be intentional. She slipped on the stairs. An expert with the identical information gave the exact opposite response. So the defense and the prosecution both found experts with great resumes to say two wildly different things. I bring that up to say, if you have subjective criteria, you can find any data point you want to make your argument. And so
you torture the data till it gives you the answer you want.
Exactly. And of course we didn't get any explanation, any real explanation for why who got ahead. I mean, nothing. But this is why I so often talk about how things are not right in college sports beyond NIL and portal. This isn't right. Imagine trying to implement this system today. Let's pretend that it didn't exist this way, that we were creating a new baseball postseason. And okay, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to have 32 conference tournaments, and the champions of those tournaments are all going to get in. Even the Patriot League? Yes, yeah, all of them. Well, we're just going to give access to big and small, and they're all going to get it. Okay, how do we pick the other 32 teams? Well, we're going to get a bunch of athletic directors from different conferences, and they're going to sit in a room for a few days, and they're going to decide who's the best. Well, how do they decide that? Well, we give them a mathematical formula called the RPI. That's what they'll use. Okay, so they're just going to go off of what the RPI says? Well, no. They'll use it, though, but they'll also implement things like record against their conference teams. Well, the conferences are different. They are. But, sometimes they can use that, or other times they can use this. And, okay, so are we going to get to hear the process and how they select it? No, they're going to do it behind closed doors. Okay, well.
I mean, when the thing that gets me is you already have all these metrics. So they took all those metrics and then combined them to make a new metric. Like, where did that come from? Yeah. Who came up with that idea?
Just arbitrary numbers just kind of thrown out here. And there's no way that any of those people, because it's impossible, watched enough college baseball to go, here are the 16 best teams. But when you look at how they selected them, there's no sense to it. There's no rationale. They couldn't explain it. And so if we were creating this system today, everybody would call it insanity. Wait, hold on. East Carolina's athletic director was on the committee that awarded East Carolina a host spot that is financially beneficial to East Carolina? We're going to let that happen? That's insane. Why would we do that? But since it's always been this way, we just kind of accept it. The process is incredibly stupid. And yes, the same thing applies in the basketball tournament to a degree. And the same thing is going to apply in the football tournament now to a degree. When you have subjective criteria, anybody in the room can pick and choose whatever stat or number that they want to fit how they select their teams.
Yeah.
But when you look at how they got 1 through 16, and when you look at how they seeded this deal, there is no sense to be had. We should not accept this, and yet we do. The system, the process stinks out loud. It really does. It makes no sense. And if we were to create a system today, this would not be how we would do it.
No. But it is what it is. And that's kind of where we are with this one. So Mississippi State doesn't host, and East Carolina does. State will go to Charlottesville for the Charlottesville region. That's a region I feel it's like I feel like State's pitching I know can get them through that region. What hitting shows up?
Yeah.
That's my question with them.
Virginia the 12, Mississippi State 2, St. John's the 3, Penn the 4 in Charlottesville. Were you surprised by that selection?
That they went to Charlottesville?
Mm-hmm.
A little. I thought they might be the 2 in Greenville, to be honest with you. I thought they would be the 2 at whoever the 16 seeds was. But at the same time, and this is something I was told, that's Mississippi State people and the people that were fighting for Mississippi State in there were kind of adamant, like, if State's not going to host, we're not going to pair them with Tennessee. We're going to pair them somewhere else.
Interesting.
So that they end up getting paired with Fayetteville and sent to Charlottesville. I mean, again, State is probably the number 1-2 seed on the board, right? So why are they at the 12 seeds regional?
Yeah.
It's just another one of those things that doesn't make any sense. There's no subjective process to this.
Fayetteville, by the way, the other side of the bracket, Arkansas, Louisiana Tech, Kansas State, and Southeast Missouri. So one would be right to assume if Arkansas somehow loses that regional and Mississippi State wins the Charlottesville regional, the Super would be in Starkville in that scenario.
In all likelihood, yes.
Yeah. So let's look at it further. And turning the page to Southern Miss now. Tennessee, the number 1 overall seed after winning the SEC.
As they should be.
As they should be. With Southern Miss the 2, Indiana the 3, and Northern Kentucky the 4. So back to your point about what's the rationale. If you're filling out a bracket, if you're doing it the right way, then the number 1 overall seed should get the worst number 2 seed.
The 32.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no way that Southern Miss was the 32.
I mean, their
No
RPI
way.
was 26, right behind Mississippi State. They have 40 wins. They won their conference tournament. There's no way they're the 32. No chance. They're probably like the 18 or the 19. You know, I would say that of the 2 seeds, right, State, LSU, South Carolina, and Southern Mississippi. Probably, if you could flip-flop South Carolina and Southern Mississippi. Wake Forest is probably in that discussion as well. But those are the ones, and yet Southern Miss is going to Tennessee. If the numbers made sense, right? If you could point to this is how we did this, and I could look at it and understand it, nobody's complaining today. We complain because everything is shrouded in so much secrecy that you have no idea who is doing what and where and why. You have no idea why Mississippi State can go to the conference tournament, win 2 quad 1 games, lose 2 quad 1 games by 1 run apiece, and drop 5-6 spots in the RPI. There's no explanation for it in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, again, and I keep saying this, that State's, at the end of the day, State's got only itself to blame. If they had won the games they were supposed to win, and I mean, I can point to like 10 or 12 games where it's like, if State had just done this, if they hold on to a 9th inning lead against Florida twice, if they hold on to a 9th inning lead or a lead against Arkansas twice, if they hold on to an 8th inning lead against Ole Miss, if they beat a bad Missouri team that had nothing to play for on the final day of the season, or if they had won any of those 5 quad 1 games, or if they had just held on to beat South Alabama, I feel like almost any one of those games might have been a difference for Mississippi State. And so that's kind of my point, that as much as it stings to not host, at the end of the day, you can easily see why they made that decision, because State gave them way too much ammunition.
Yeah.